Okay, great. So here we are. It's myself and Igor and Mike Monroe from OBLSK. We attended the DHH did a Ruby on Rails code walkthrough for their Campfire project about a week and a half ago. And Igor and I talked a little bit about it a couple weeks back, and we thought it would be good to just share our thoughts as well. So quick intros here. I'm Mike Monroe. I'm one of the founders at OBLSK. We're a consultancy, software consultancy that specializes in Ruby on Rails. And I'll turn it over to Igor, who can do a quick intro about himself.
Yeah, hello. I'm Igor Alexandrov, CTO and co-founder of JetRockets, software consulting company. And as Mike already said, we've been attended to code walkthrough of a Campfire, and on this call we decided to
talk it through.
To talk about
the
code base, to talk about how it happened, and what we found out from this walkthrough.
Yeah, it would be great. We're both, we got a lot of years under both of us on the Rails side, so I think it would be good just to talk about some generic topics.
Yes.
Some of the things that I know you and I thought were important to us, and some of the nuances, and just somehow how we deal with some things in our teams, how we kind of do some things in our code bases, and maybe that's different or similar to what DHH and 37 Signals does. But we chatted a little bit about it, and we thought it was great to come back around and share with others. I think both of our audiences might get some, might learn a couple things if they haven't had a chance to watch it, or are just too busy with their own Rails projects. Just some background here. I'm from OBLSK, and Igor is from JetRockets. We're both in the Rails consultancy space, and I've become very good friends with Igor. I know Natalie, who is the CEO of JetRockets as well. So this is an exciting opportunity for us to kind of chat and share with both of our audiences. So let's jump right in. I think one of the bigger things, and DHH talked a lot about this, was just naming. And he talked about how it's, at one point he had this, he kind of was talking about one of the names, and he just said, oh, it fits so correctly. And I'm going to forget his words, but he was right on. It's hard though. Like, naming is really tough. I think in smaller projects, coming up with names in a domain sometimes is easy, but then sometimes it's really hard, especially over time. I think in a greenfield project, something that's starting from scratch, that's a little bit smaller in scope, names just fit and they don't change much. But then you have larger projects where there are competing domain ideas, and they're similar, and it can be hard. I'm interested to hear kind of just, what do you think about naming, and how do you guys tackle that within your team?
Yeah, for me, of course, naming is also a very complex thing in programming, especially as you probably know or understand that I'm not a native speaker in English. So for me, it's very hard to find a very specific word for each domain model, each domain object. And regarding the Campfire, I think they've done a great job in finding correct classes names for each part of a code base. And what I also want to mention is that they don't use, they try to use as simple names as possible, as short names as possible, not combine two words, instead try to find a single word to describe an object. And it's great, really. It's very great to look at, and it's very easy to understand the code base.
Yes.
Because naming is very definitive. They found exact words that that describe the code base perfectly.
Yes, I couldn't have said it better. That was That was a very good summary. And it's interesting. I think one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this, because I think senior developers realize just how important naming is.
Yeah.
It's really funny with the senior people on my team. There's times where we'll go back and forth in Slack, you know, for a long period of time, and sometimes over days where, you know, someone has a PR and we put it in, and someone in the team says, you know, that name, it's good, but maybe we should really, because we all know the nuances involved, right? And if you it sometimes you don't get it right, and that's okay. And code is modular, and so you can make some refactorings down the road if need be. But if you really can come up with that name, it's worth that time investment up front to really kind of sit back. You know, you've been working on a large PR for multiple days, and when you go to submit that for a review within your team, it's good to just really sit back, and especially if you're introducing new concepts, naming is important in thinking about like, is there a better name here? That's for classes, that's for methods. It's really good to just if things can self-describe, and you're leaving a trail, not just for the next developer who you're working with on the team, but even for yourself when you come back 3 to 6 months later and you're looking at code.
I agree.
You really want to understand how the pieces fit together.
I agree. The easiest example is like, imagine you have a user model and I don't know, like group model.
Yes.
And if you have an association between them, you can call them either user group, or call it membership. And membership is actually perfect.
Yes.
Because and I can give the same examples to like everything in each code base. You should always find a word that will describe what are you dealing with. Not try to create new words. You should find an existing word.
That's a great example. And the other thing that leads you to is, because, you know, I mentioned method names. It's one thing. Membership has like this definition, right? This knowledge that's tied to it. And so there are things, you know, that could be attached to a membership that makes sense to someone who's knowledgeable of a membership. Whereas a user group is just, it's a word that signifies users and groups, right? So membership itself leads you into, it kind of helps you shape the names of some of the things that the functionality that's going to be tied to these memberships as well, which is helpful. So I think, you know, a big nugget there, especially for you know, junior developers as they're leveling up, naming is tough, and they should always rely on the mentors and seniors in the teams. But even mid-level engineers, taking that time and really thinking hard about how things are named, it's a tremendous help. And it's so funny because it seems like such a soft skill, right? You know, you're not writing, it's not an algorithm, you're not like looking up
such a basic
it's a basic thing. But it really, I think it's one of the things that compounds the most. And so compounding meaning like, you know, you're building a bunch of bricks together, and if you have a lot of good names inside of a code base, it's easier to understand, it's easy to communicate about, and those are super important soft things that really have a positive impact on a code base.
Yeah, sure.
So another topic that I had too, that I noted, and it's interesting because I picked up on it during the during DHH's discussion and walkthrough, which was concerns. And it stuck out to me because I've seen some other blog posts, and just I've seen DHH online before. And concerns have always been I think they use them pretty heavily inside of 37 Signals. I think it's I can see why. It's interesting though. It's funny. I'm going to find myself saying this a few times today, because I was going to say, we don't use them often, but that's not true. I think like a lot of things in software it depends. Depending on the project, depending on the shared functionality that we might want to live together. They're trade-offs. It's one that always sticks out, that is almost always a concern for us, is pagination, right? Like if you're doing that's like the easy one. You know, like you have a bunch, if you're building something with front end web code, and you know, you have a lot of items that you need to present. Pagination is the easiest one. That, like, it's such a good model for something that can live in a concern. But it's interesting how they use it. I think for us, where really that play is, we tend to lean. Here's another thing where I want to be careful about being so absolute. But we're careful about levels of abstraction, right? And
Yes.
so, like, a concern is a level of abstraction.
Yeah.
And so it's always that, like, it's that trade-off, right? Like, does this piece of it's this weird, like, could this piece of logic, yeah, maybe it doesn't really fit in the model, but the model it's a smaller model. We're only going to be using it here. It's the trade-offs, right?
Yeah, for me, I don't use concerns a lot in my code, as well as far as I understand, you do not use them too. And for me, it's always been like a code smell. You know, if there are a lot of concerns in a Rails code base, I always thought that it's a code smell.
Okay.
And why? Because there are a lot of Rails developers, Rails experts who say that concerns are actually Rails code smell. And when we grew up as a professionals, when we read all these experts, when we look at other people how they do, we say, okay, if they say that it's a code smell, and if I also understand that it violates some principles of object-oriented design, then definitely yes. Let's consider this as a code smell. But on the other side, I think that sometimes simplicity and maintainability of a code base is actually better compared to perfect design and perfect following of principles of object-oriented programming. So here, I can say that concerns in a Campfire code base, they improve simplicity. With concerns, it's easier to make code simple, understandable, and maintainable. Maybe not so good designed, yes, but it's simple and it's great, really.
Yeah.
So, at least for me, I understood that if, and I also knew the fact that David loves concerts a lot, and all 37 Signals team, they love concerts a lot, because this is why it exists in Rails. Let's be honest.
Yes.
And so
and
now
David has his he has his style.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So now I see how they use them, and I see why it exists in Rails.
Sure.
And now it doesn't seem to me, and starting from after I participated in this code walkthrough, let's say that, at least for now, I will say that it's not a code smell anymore.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting. I think right on. I mean, I think for us, we're not afraid to use them in any way, shape, or form. It's and I think for us, and a lot of it goes back to exactly what you said. Keeping things simple and maintenance is such a huge. If you do those things well, and simplicity is hard to do. This goes back to, like, naming things right seems so simple. But these are the hard challenges. And maintainability is if you have a code base that is easy to maintain and, easier to maintain, whatever you have to do to not only for your team, but also as new team members come on, how do you easily get them up to speed? How do you come back to your own code, 6 months, 12 months from now in a larger project, and kind of, understand what are those breadcrumbs that you left for yourself? Why did you make certain decisions the way that you made them? How do you get your code base to tell you the story, leave the story that you left for the next person who's going to come along? And it's interesting. Yeah, I think it's so, because so for us, I don't mind concerns at all because we don't use them like 37 Signals does, or at least we've never have in a project. But it's interesting because I think the thing that I don't love, and you've seen this, like I think DHH has some examples online. I don't know any off the top of my head, but like he's shown code before where there's just a ton of includes right at the top of the file.
Yeah, I remember.
And it's sometimes if you're but 37 Signals in DHH, they do a good job of their, I think I would argue, like with their levels of extraction. Sometimes the fact that there's a ton in concerns, it can be hard, but I know for me, it goes back to like what he says too, is it's like, how do you make it easier to fit some things in your head as well, right? Like if you have to, which can be tough. I think that's where I struggle sometimes, is if there's a lot of concerns and they are impacting the model, like, sometimes it's like, oh, and if I'm not familiar with the code base, I'm looking in this concern for some logic. I'm looking in this concern for some logic. And I get it. Like we want to abstract some things away that, the person who's coming along and is really just looking at like what at the top level, like what is this class making available to me? But if you're in the nuts and bolts and it's a bigger feature or a bug fix that you're working on, like you might need that context. And, with a lot of concerns that can be hard at times. So
of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
There's no silver bullet. Like I said, even without concerns, your code base may become, and probably would become, hard to maintain as it grows.
Yes.
But definitely, it's not because you use concerns or not use concerns. It's a native process. The code base grows. It becomes harder to maintain, harder to understand. So at least it happens not because of concerns.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that was a great summary there. Okay. Why don't we move on to, you and I had exchanged some notes ahead of this. I thought there was a great one that you brought up was, just the controllers versus models inside of the project. I think people have heard the term, fat models, skinny controllers. They've done a pretty good job of that. They put a lot 100%. Of logic in models and keep the controllers very light. So why don't we let you kind of flow a little bit with that one? I know that's an important piece of just code design, especially in a Rails project. So what are some things you might want to share there?
Keeping controllers, keeping business logic outside of controllers, let's turn it this way, is a big question in Rails community, and I always try to follow this principle when I work on greenfield projects, on new projects in our company. But at the same time, when we for some reason we start to work on a project, on an existing project, on a project with a history, yes. I always find business logic and controllers. It's just in 100% of projects that I took apart in existing projects, this happened. And here in Campfire, at least for now, controller actions are I don't know, 5 or 4 lines of code, or
Yeah.
maybe 6 lines of code.
Yeah.
And it's great. Again, it's great because it's very, very simple.
Yep.
And you can easily understand what is going on in each action. And also from a tests standpoint,
Yes.
it's easier to write test on a, I don't know, on a model method, on a
Yes.
model instance method or model class method, compared to writing tests on a business logic that is defined in controller action.
Yes. Right on. Yeah. I think the
Of
other
course
thing
it's,
too. Yeah. Keep going.
yeah, of course it's easier.
Yeah.
You will just write a unit test and you're done.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny though, because, you know, I think you touched on a really good topic there, which is, a lot of these things are easier in greenfield code bases, right? But, you know, most developers every day they're getting up and they're working in something that's been around for multiple years. Rails developers probably been through multiple versions of Rails over the
Yeah.
over the life of the product. Different team members that have come and gone. You know, different styles. And so, you know, I think a big thing that we see a lot of is not only, or I shouldn't say a lot, I think it ebbs and flows, but not only projects that have, you know, a decent amount of business logic in the controls, but also just, you know, we have a tendency to try to follow RESTful patterns as much as we can, right? And so like
Yeah.
for us, it's,
Yeah.
you know, the traditional actions inside of a controller. But the, you know, the thought that run into my mind, and we see this often, is, you know, a lot of times you'll see teams love to just bury some logic in a custom action that they define inside of a controller. That's really at the end of the day is just some business logic. And I think it's helpful
Yeah, and
though
this
if you
and usually this action is called like create something with something or
right
again
on.
again if you
Yeah.
if you see a method name, I mean action name
Yes.
that includes 2 words or more,
Yes.
usually it's a code smell. Usually it's at this point you should try to figure out what you are doing,
Yeah. In a
because
good, yes. Yeah. A good tip there, especially for you people who are struggling with this, is uh abstract that away into another controller, right?
yeah,
So like a good example would be or one that pops out often is say you have some users. You have a user controller and you know, you can create them, you can list them, typical Rails actions, controller actions, index, new, create, edit, delete, right? Your
yeah,
basic CRUD. And you want to export those users. So you
yeah.
want to have a little export button that exports to CSV. You know, it's very easy to just, oh, I'll just add an export action. Yes, but that's a slippery slope, right? And so it, you know, you could at that point you might think a nicer path is, okay, I should reach for an exports controller. Because you're exporting users now, but you know, maybe you have groups that you're going to export a few, whatever those models are that are key to your
Yeah,
domain.
the very easy example is if you only have a export button that actually posts a request to
Mm-hmm.
to web server, it's okay. You can create an export action in users controller, but at some point you will definitely have a model window where you will select options. So I don't know what.
Yep.
And this model window is actually a GET request. Usually it's a GET request.
Yep.
And if you will still try to keep your export logic in users controller, you will
Yep.
have like new export action or method in the controller, and then
Yep.
actual export, or I don't know, like export modal action or something like
Yes.
this.
Yes. 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 It gets
And
messy really fast, you
yes,
know?
exactly.
And so a lot of times it's good to start. And then also just it gets you back into that, like, okay, I have another controller. How do I think about, am I creating something? Am I editing something? Am I updating something? Am I removing something? And you have those actions, they're available to you. And it keeps everything nice and concise. You're following similar patterns. And it just, when you start, and as your controllers, it's like everything else. Like as humans, we love to see patterns, right? And so
Yeah.
there's, in software, there's always nuances, but like if you end up, you got a bigger project, you got 20 controllers, you're rattling through, whether you're doing some refactoring or what it is, and you're just always seeing those same actions. It's nice,
Yeah,
but
I
when
agree.
when you drop into, as consultants, a lot of times we drop in and we're trying to wrap our head around a code base, and it's like, okay, we have some logic and some models. Okay, well, there's some domain logic inside of some models. There's some domain logic inside of some controllers. And now we're really talking about this, like, how do we hold it all in our head, right? Like, this is when I'm drawing pictures, I'm writing notes. I got enough gray hair where my brain isn't as fresh as it used to be. The stack can only get so big,
Yeah, if we started to talk about business logic and controllers and models, the next good question that always, as far as I remember myself in Rails community, everybody asked it, where to keep my business logic that is not actually an active record.
Yes. Great segue. That was another
Yes.
note you had. Let's keep rolling on that. That's a great topic.
Yeah. So, and everybody does it in different ways. Somebody creates, I don't know, like lib folder inside of app. If you're using service objects, then you will create services
Yep.
folder. And the answer is easy, actually. The answer is easy. Just keep it in the models.
Sure.
Because and it's a very good, it seems like it's a very good example. If you come back to our export functions that we just created with you a couple of minutes ago, if you will consider this export like a model and you will keep it in models,
Yep.
then it's very native for you to create a new controller for it, because you always create a new controller when you have a new active record model. Yes, it's native. It feels like a native action for you as a Rails developer. So if you will consider all not active record classes, like plain old Ruby objects, also as a models, it will be very native, very easy for you to create a new controller when you will have to deal with an export function like what we talked about previously. So it's good, really.
It's perfect. And really, I mean, I think like anything else, patterns and choices. The good news is, I think you mentioned a few different ways that different teams do it, right? And okay, the style may change, but really, if you are spreading logic, it sounds so easy, right? Like you want to keep your surface area small, but like at least if a lot of your logic is, if you are using service objects, fine. But like someone comes onto the team, you say, okay, this is a pattern that we use. You'll find some active record models, and you'll find some other models. We like to use service objects, and you can go look in the services folder. If you're using lib, whatever it is, it's fine. But at least it's kind of like contained. But I do like, especially for smaller projects, right? Like, code is modular. You can do refactorings, and I think as you get more and more experience, you kind of, there's always this trade-off, right? Like there's no need to premature optimize. And yes, that's a thing with performance, but it's also with just like structure and where things live. And you don't need to have any level of complexity. So keeping things simple is definitely simple. And
as long as it's possible to keep things simple.
And you adjust
simple.
Yes, you adjust on the road. But you did raise, it's an interesting topic that I think comes up with a lot of junior developers, especially people who are new to Rails, is they get in this mindset where like models are active record models. Like it needs to be something that is interacting with the database. And as we all know, it's craziness to us, but like that's not true. In Rails, you can have, plain old Ruby objects, and you should use them. You touched on it earlier. You may have some concepts. A good example is if you have some logic that's business logic that's sitting in a controller and not really where it should live. It's a good, add a model, contain some of that logic.
Exactly.
Especially pieces of logic that fit well together. Think of here we are, like, think of what the right name is for that thing. Think of the names for those methods that should be the messages that are attached to that model. It goes a long way, it goes back to just like organization, knowing the tools that you have available to you. But I think that's a big one that hits on some juniors who are new to Rails and kind of just wrapping, because all the tutorials, everything's an active record model, right?
Yes,
And then
yes,
you
yes,
kind of
yeah, yeah.
like you have the shape in your head of like where things should live, and I think that's where
This is something that should be added to Rails.
the guides maybe. Yeah, it's
Rails
been
guides, yes, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I know that Rails team started to work on refactoring Rails guides.
Yes. There's a
So
lot of
this
work on
is
the documentation lately.
yeah,
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 for
yeah, yeah,
sure.
yeah. So this is something that should be added to Rails guides, because if you're junior developer 100%, you think that in models there should be only active record models,
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
in
Because that's
controllers.
just the patterns you learn. Yeah, it's all CRUD stuff. Yeah. And it is. And you can actually go really far, right? Like that's what's great about Rails. You go watch a tutorial, you want to build a product, even from scratch, you have a little bit of coding knowledge, you've learned a little bit of Rails, you can go real far with CRUD, you know? And if
Yeah,
anything,
yeah,
like
I
that's a
agree.
good thing.
I agree, Mike.
Yeah.
Uh,
So
okay,
yeah,
so what's
so
next?
we've been going a little while here. I think we've covered some good stuff. Is there anything else in your notes? I'm in no rush. Happy to chat a little bit more. Anything else in your notes that you thought were important that we didn't
Uh,
chat about that we should?
let's talk about SQL queries.
Oh
Uh,
yes, that's a
yeah,
great one. Yes, let's definitely do that.
yeah.
Do you want to
So
go
yeah,
ahead?
in
Go
the
ahead.
Campfire, it's very simple topic to
Yeah.
talk about. So there are no handwritten queries, or at least it's very hard to find handwritten queries in Campfire code base.
Yep.
And actually, this leads at least me to two things. First of all, and this is what I try to do also when I write Ruby Rails. Try not to use handwritten queries as long as possible.
Sure.
And the second thing is more complex, is that sometimes, not sometimes, you should always try to optimize your data structure before you will try to optimize your queries. So query optimization is something that should be done when you cannot optimize your data structure to make queries as simple as possible.
Yes.
And query optimization is something that should be done only when it's not possible, or it's hard to change the structure of the data.
Yeah, I think that's very fair feedback, and it's very interesting. It's an interesting topic because it's another one where it depends, right? So like when you start thinking about a data model, especially when your project is smaller and the pieces fit very well together, as it grows, and your activity grows, and it's interesting. I think it's fair. Like we're not talking about as data scales, you have larger issues to deal with, and I think like very minuscule optimizations become important, but you go a long way with a simple data model that follows pretty simple following typical rules. You don't have to you don't have to denormalize early on, but if that helps, if user ID being available in another table but it makes a query much easier, faster, simpler in the code base, maybe that makes sense. But that's the thing, it's an ongoing, it's funny. This is another area similar to naming. As projects grow, our senior developers will often have a lot of back and forth on, does the way that the data is modeled today, does it fit? We
Yeah.
got some new requirements.
Yes.
And we'll
Yes.
take that time, you know, it's
Yeah.
what did we know then? What do we know now? What
Yeah.
do we know about the direction we're moving in? And
Mhm.
that very well may have a tremendous impact on the data model that you're working with. And when those moments come, especially if you keep up with it, take a step back. Does the model that we have today fit? Okay, let's
Yeah.
make some adjustments. And it goes right
Yes.
back into, it feeds back into, you know, what you were stating, which is optimizations at the model level. You get a lot of leverage out of that. You get a lot of positive return from doing that. And it's another system inside of your code base or inside of your platform that is modular. And don't be afraid to change it as you move along. You know, I think
Absolutely.
that's
Yeah.
super important.
You should always ask yourself, does it fit or not? Your
Yes.
current system, your current situation, and you should always be ready to the situation where you will have to change the data structure before implementing some new features, before working on some new queries or something like this. So you should not be afraid to do this, and you should always ask
Yes.
yourself, does it still fit or not? If not, just change data structure. Don't be afraid. And it's a great example. In Campfire, I actually scrolled through the models. They don't have,
Yeah.
I don't see any custom SQL queries.
Yep.
It's perfect,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah. It's right on. I mean, it's
Of
the
course, of
go
course,
ahead.
it's a relatively new project. I understand that maybe
Yeah.
somebody will
Yep.
who will watch this video will say, "Guys, Campfire is a new project. What are you talking about?" Yes, I agree. But even I've
Yes.
seen 100 times, really, when
Yeah.
at the very beginning of the project, when you can change literally everything, when you don't have a production, when you don't have a real users,
Yep.
you come to a situation where some queries are so complex.
Yep.
Why? Because the data doesn't fit
Yes.
your
Couldn't agree with you
business
more.
needs.
Yeah. You know what it's, don't be afraid to write a migration,
Yes,
you know,
exactly.
take a step back, talk with,
Yeah.
and even if you're by yourself, go Discord these days, there's Discord, go into a Discord channel, describe kind of like where you're at, get some feedback from someone else on your data model. It goes a long way. And it goes right back to what you just described though. And this is like fighting against complexity, right?
Yes.
Like we talked about simplicity and maintainability earlier on. When you have it, it makes life so much easier. It's a breath of fresh air. But
Yes.
complexity continues to breed more complexity. So you got right to the heart of it. You have a project that's early on, and I get it. Maybe you're doing some POC stuff, and a managing director comes in and says, I have this nice little idea for this great little feature, and maybe you're just going to put a little POC together just to show something off in a meeting. But then when you've all agreed, yes, this is a feature, it's going to live on in this project. Okay, you slammed a column onto a table, for a demo, fine. But as soon as that's done, you take that step back and say, okay, I already know because and a complicated query is a good smell, right? It's wait, why am I doing this? Why am I having to think about this crazy query to just get this like little bit of data to come back? Like that's a good point to like make you step back and say to yourself, like, is there a reason for this complexity? And maybe there is.
Maybe.
But if there isn't, it's like, okay, let's think about the data model. Let's talk about it in the team. Let's revisit what we have. Let's move some things around. And now the code base and the database have gotten some positive some positive changes that are not only leveraging for myself but also the team members and for the
Yeah, I
product.
agree.
You
I
know,
agree.
it's there. Those small changes end up being big wins.
I totally agree.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so glad you brought up that topic. That was one, I meant to, I didn't star that one. That was a good one though. That was a good one. I'm glad we, that was a good one to circle back around on. Anything else that you have that we should chat about? We went pretty long here. This was pretty good. I think we were thinking, maybe 20 minutes. We've been rocking out for a little while. It's some good topics to cover.
No, actually, I don't have any other major topics to talk about because this can we can come to a situation where we'll talk for 2 hours.
I know we could go forever. And hopefully, I know Natalie was chatting with us earlier on too. I hope she appreciates some of the feedback that we've had. I think both of our audiences and maybe some of our clients, maybe there's some nuggets in here that they can use. And this was just a lot of fun. So
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I'm glad.
After we decided to record this video, I understood that maybe it will be a good idea to start a YouTube channel. And there are a lot of YouTube videos with some Rails, and not only Rails tutorials, where like Rails casts were 5 or 6 years ago. Yeah, it was a perfect way to learn Rails, and but now there are quite a lot of such channels like Go Rails, like Super Rails, and even Rails casts are still something that you can watch and learn. And I decided, not decided, I thought that it would be good to start a YouTube channel where there will be open source projects code walkthrough.
Oh, that sounds like a great idea.
Yes, because, and there are 2 reasons why I decided that would be good. The first one is because those people who will watch these videos, they will have a better understanding of how this project works, how the code base is organized, and where to find an answers for their questions. Like they see that there is an issue, there is a bug, and where to find why this bug exists. Yes, or even if you will go to a GitHub and see a list of issues, at least you will be able to understand where you can try to find a piece of a code base that is responsible for this issue, not responsible, that causes this issue.
Yeah, for sure. I follow.
So
yeah,
it's so this is the first one, the first reason, and the second reason is because studying an open source, and of course before do a code walkthrough, you should study project well.
Yeah,
improves your code
quality
a lot, because you just look at some others code and you find pros and cons and different approaches. That
there's no better way to level up, especially for juniors. And you force yourself, you find some stuff, there's some lines of code that you don't understand, you force yourself to learn it. It really helps. Yeah,
I agree. So my idea was to start a YouTube channel with such code walkthrough videos. See how it goes.
Yeah, you should give it a try. I think those would be some awesome videos to watch. You'd have a subscriber here. I'd love to check it out.
If you want to participate, we can do it together.
Yeah, maybe we'll try to maybe we can try to do some together at some point. I'd love that. I did a few YouTube videos myself. I have like 6 on higher level topics. I'll share the channel with you. I was outsourcing the editing, which was the schedule and the editing was getting hard to keep up with. But yeah, I have a few just on higher topics. But yeah, like I think this could be something cool that we could try to explore. And like I said, this was fun. So I'd definitely be interested in trying to tackle something like this again in the future.
Yeah, but since we both participated in Campfire code walkthrough, even in live mode, it's possible. I mean, you just walk through the code base. You try to explain why this is done. This has been done this way or that way.
Yeah.
And that's it. At least for now, I try to. I think that it's definitely possible. I
Yeah.
will try to record a couple of videos and see how it goes.
Yeah.
And
yeah, and we'll chat about it offline. We'll see if we can circle around and do something together. That would be fun.
Yeah.
This is awesome. Igor, thank you so much for I know this is later in the day for you, so thanks for taking the time and chatting today. And I'm sure Natalie will be super happy about some of the topics we discussed, and we'll keep her in the loop, and we'll share this with our audiences in a few different ways, I think.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks again. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Bye, Igor.
Bye.